Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Icing on the Skate podcast. Hello everyone, how are we doing this evening? Good? Glad to hear it. So, me again, there's Chris over there. How you doing, bud? How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
Good. So, we've got another week of talking about all things Elite Ice Hockey League, all things National Hockey League, and a bit of everything in between. Why not? Let's do it. So, we've actually got quite a lot to talk about today. I was writing the list of topics for stuff to discuss today, and I have far too many tabs open on my computer right now. There is literally like a dozen of them, or even more, just all littered on my PC right now. So hopefully the stream will hold up. I'm hoping that the podcast doesn't have its weekly technical difficulty. Wrong. Yeah, absolutely. You know what this podcast is like. It's not the icing on the skate if something doesn't go wrong. So, Chris,
yes.
We had some stuff happen with the regular season, but more so with the Challenge Cup this week. So, do you want to just take us through all of the games that took place and everything that happened this last week in the Elite League?
Yes, as you said, it was predominantly a Challenge Cup weekend. 3 Elite League fixtures, one on Friday night, Giants 2, Flames 1. One on Saturday, Devils 3, Storm 1. And one on Sunday, Storm 1, Clan 4. In the Challenge Cup, that was where the most of the action was. On Saturday, it was Flames 4, Blaze 2, Panthers 1, Steelers 3, Clan 3, Flyers 2, and Stars 4, Giants 3. And then on Sunday, it was Steelers 4, Panthers 3 after penalty shots, Flyers 3, Stars 4, and Blaze 3, Devils 1.
So, lots of points being handed around in each of the different Challenge Cup groups. I believe we talked about this either yesterday or just before we started streaming, Chris. We're getting close to Group A being finished with the Challenge Cup.
Yes.
But we've got a few more games in Group B and C. We're going to talk about the Challenge Cup in a lot of detail.
We are, yes.
In a lot of detail for the foreseeable future, especially in the play under review, because there is quite literally so much to talk about, and it's so confusing. Chris and I sit here and we talk about it every week in some detail.
I've got the grasp of it more this year than last year.
Okay.
But we'll cover it more. It doesn't make any more sense than it does last year, but I can understand it better this year.
Okay, good.
But we'll cover it in more detail in our play under review. Put it this way, I haven't had to spend an hour making a spreadsheet of permutations.
Which, if you don't know Chris, he loves to make spreadsheets.
I do. So, I do love the stats, statistics, spreadsheets, all that sort of stuff.
He loves a good spreadsheet. So why not, Why not? So, Chris, do you want to just take us through the standings?
Yes, I'll do the league only, seeing as we're going into the Challenge Cup.
Do that.
So I'll do the league only. So top of the league are the Glasgow Clan with 10 points. Then it's the Devils in second on 6, the Flyers in third on 6, and the Steelers in fourth on 6.
Yep.
The Giants in 5th on 5. Interestingly, they're the only team that can leapfrog Glasgow with the game in hand. Games in hand, sorry. Panthers in 6th on 5. Dundee in 7th on 5. The Blaze in 8th on 4 in the final playoff spot. The Flames in 9th and the Storm in 10th, both on 4.
So we're now starting to see a bit of separation between the top and the bottom of the standings. Still very close, but the more we get into the season, of course, we're now, 5 weeks into the season, I think, officially? 5-6 weeks?
Yes, and the thing, yes, the league is very close, but if you look at the teams who have games in hand, the teams who have games in hand are the ones at the top.
Absolutely.
Which means that when they win those games in hand, I'm talking Belfast, Cardiff, Fife here, then there is going to be that separation of a few points.
Exactly, and of course we've got the Devils and the Giants playing Champions Hockey League games.
Yes.
This week, their first game tomorrow, I believe.
It is for Cardiff. I didn't see Belfast. Oh, it is for Belfast as well, yes.
One of them's being shown on Free Sports, so I think it's the Belfast game. I can't quite remember, though.
No, it's the Cardiff game.
Oh, is it? Okay, I want to watch that, so good. I want to see them smash Frölunda, because that
I might have to try and persuade my household that ice hockey beats Bake Off.
Oh, that is close, though, Chris.
Mm,
Bake Off is pretty solid.
I admit it's close,
I am a big
but
fan of Bread Week, not gonna lie.
no, I do
Bake Off is
like
a
Bake.
legitimately good show, though. I will give
I
them that.
no,
Like, it's good.
I do like Bake Off, but
But
still, ice
Champions
hockey.
Hockey League, I got you. So yeah, the standings are looking interesting. Glasgow, sure, they've played a few more games than second and third place Cardiff and Fife, but they had another perfect weekend this
They
weekend.
can't actually be overtaken though,
Yeah, well,
with
except
the
by
games in
Belfast.
hand. Except by Belfast, yeah, but Glasgow have now won 6 in a row.
Yeah, they've had, is that now three perfect weekends in a row?
Yes, it is, yeah.
So if they win their next like weekend, both of the
Which
games,
is a double homestand against Belfast.
which will be tough but not impossible.
Yeah, but
I
if they do win those games, Belfast can't overtake them in the standings.
and they will have gone undefeated for a month,
Hmm.
which would be incredible, especially considering what we discussed like 3 weeks ago with this team. Like I keep bringing it up because they keep playing so well.
You're going to
Like,
keep bringing it up until they lose again, aren't you,
well,
really?
yeah, why not? Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
brought it up every time. They've gone 3 weekends without being defeated, so why not? Fair
Yeah.
play to them. They're what, 5-1 on the season, 4 wins, an overtime win, and a loss. So 5-1-0
Yeah.
on the season.
5-1 in the Elite League, yeah.
Yeah, they've scored the most goals of any team. Um,
And because of the weird criteria, they've qualified for the quarterfinals of the Challenge Cup.
which we'll get into, of course, in a lot more
Yeah.
detail later. But yeah, we're gonna have to figure this out because it confuses the hell out of me every single time we talk about it.
I have figured it out, so it's
Good.
okay.
You're gonna have to explain it to me and to everybody watching.
That's
You
fine.
guys probably understand it a lot more than I do. To be fair, I haven't really been paying attention most of the time because I don't really care about the Challenge Cup that much. But that's just me. We're gonna talk about it regardless, so it doesn't matter. But let's move on to some of the topics we've got to discuss. Some of the news that we're now, like we said, about 5-6 weeks into the season. We're now starting to see some teams make some changes in their rosters because there's some players that are either leaving the teams for whatever reason or they've decided that they want to bring some more players in because the players that they've got already aren't really cutting it. So the first one we should talk
Hampers.
about. Are you? I was about to say, are you all right? So the most recent one, I should probably. Well, the most recent. This is the most recent player coming into the league that we've got. The Sheffield Steelers. They've had a bit of a turbulent start to the year, very similarly to like they did last year, but a bit more of a. There seems to be a bit more stability in Sheffield this year compared to last year. There's a lot more going on at this point in the season last year. But due to the injuries on the back end for the Sheffield Steelers, they decided to bring in Czech defenseman Marek Troninski, or Tronshinsky. I think it's Tronshinsky. Tronshinsky.
That's how I think it is
Yeah,
as well. I should have
Tronshinsky.
asked Steph really on Saturday night.
I
But
mean, it's a tough one, isn't it? Like, let's be honest. I'm an English bloke. It's difficult for me to pronounce some of these names. So he's joined the Sheffield Steelers as injury cover for the team. They are already missing Aaron Johnson and Jonas Leewing. Is it Leewing? Is that how you
yeah,
pronounce it? Yeah, Leewing. So two of their back end, two of their top six defensemen already out of the lineup due to injuries.
and of
And
course, well, I mean, not a defenseman, but they need the numbers up because Martin St. Pierre left.
exactly, yeah, that was a big loss for them as well. Not that he really had a huge impact with the team to begin with, but a high caliber name. He was another example of a big name not quite working out in the Elite League. It happens. Like, not every player that's played 400 games or however many games he played wherever he played is going to suit the Elite League. It's a different brand of hockey, and it works both ways. It doesn't mean that the Elite League isn't good enough for these players, and it doesn't mean that they're good enough or skilled enough to play in the Elite League, you know? Sometimes it just doesn't work out, which we'll see from a couple of these other players that we'll discuss. So,
Yes.
Tronshinsky is 31 years old. He began this season with Litvinov of the Czech Extraliga, where he played in 5 games with the team, and he has played almost 600 games across leagues and playoffs in his native country's top flight since debuting in the 05-06 season. And I believe 2 seasons ago, he led all defensemen in the Czech Extraliga in assists, I believe, and maybe points in general in the 17-18 season. So he's not that far removed from being one of the best offensive defensemen in his country. So, and the Czechs aren't bad hockey players. So, once again, another big name. He's maybe last year was a bit of a turbulent year for him, a bit of a down year for him, which is why he's ended up in somewhere like the Elite League. But 31 years old, he's not a guy that's hobbling on one leg. He's not a guy that's incapable of scoring points. He already got an assist this weekend against the Nottingham Panthers. So this could be a good fit for the Steelers. What do you think, Chris?
Yes, it could be a good fit. The one thing I'm concerned about is that since he started playing senior hockey in 05-06, he has only had one season where he stayed at a club.
Okay.
And so everywhere else, he's gone to various sides, either loaned out or... I mean, the norm is that he plays for 3 different sides in a season, and particularly early on in his career, kind of 09-10-ish, so when he would be kind of his early 20s maybe, early 20s, he started the season in the top tier and went down a league.
Okay.
He does have 93 games of KHL experience.
Which isn't a bad thing to have on your resume.
No. And Litvinov, he was on loan at Litvinov last season, and they obviously liked him enough to then sign him.
Yeah.
But then after 5 games, he's gone.
Yeah, so I guess there's like a handful of reasons for that. It could be that he's brought in like for this team as injury cover, and then another team needs somebody as injury cover. He jumps to the next team. It could be he's not quite got the role either he or the team really needs him on, and another team's like, oh, we'll take him and he could be a top 4 defenseman for us. He goes and slots over in another team. Or it could be down to, this is purely speculation, but it could be perhaps something with his attitude. Maybe he doesn't click well with certain organisations, or he's had to leave certain organisations due to relationships that have gone sour. That's purely speculation. I have no evidence to say that that is the case. But like you said, it is a bit of a red flag when you see how many teams he's played for in such a small span of time. If he's averaging 3 teams a season, there's got to be... It's either he's very much in demand from everywhere, or he's not quite good enough to find somewhere to stick. But then again, that's been in the Czech League predominantly. The Elite League isn't quite at that level of competition, so maybe he does find a more permanent home here. I mean... To be honest, if he lasts out for the season for the Sheffield Steelers and has a good showing for the Steelers, that's all the Sheffield Steelers need from him.
Yeah.
You know, he can leave at the end of the season if that's what he wants to do, but until then, play your best hockey and sort it out when you're here. So that's the first big move for the Sheffield Steelers. Of course, it's kind of been, their hand has been somewhat forced to do this, since they've had to get somebody in to cover some of their injuries in the lineup. So this, I would imagine that this would have been a guy that they might not have picked up if they had a healthy roster. But we'll see how he does. He already picked up his first assist, so he's already putting points on the board. And the one interesting thing I've noticed, I've checked both the Sheffield Steelers and the Elite League's coverage of this. They don't say if it's a short-term deal or if it's a season-long contract, which kind of irritates me. Of course, because he's here as injury cover, you think it's going to be like a 1-month deal. But then if you find out it's a season-long contract, you're like, oh, well, I feel silly now, you know? I don't know. There you go. Anyway, Steelers get some help on the back end. He's doing all right in Sheffield so far by the looks of it. Then we move on to the next player to join a team, and this one is a recent NHL draft pick from Belgium for the Guildford Flames. Wouter Peters, I believe is how you say his name, or Wouter, I don't know. He's Danish. What do you want? So he is 21 years old.
He's Belgian.
What?
He's Belgian.
Sorry, Belgian. You know what I mean. Oh, it's all the same, isn't it, Chris?
No, it's really not.
So, the 21-year-old Belgian, just to make sure I get that right, was drafted in the 3rd round in the 2016 NHL entry draft by the Chicago Blackhawks. And interestingly, he hasn't played in any senior hockey until coming to Guildford. He's played with the Red Bull Junior Academy in Salzburg. He's played with the KHL's Jokerit junior team, and he spent 2 seasons in the USHL. So he's very much he's very much played junior hockey. He's only 21, but it's very interesting to see a former third-round pick winding up in somewhere like the Elite League already. Like, he was only drafted 3 years ago. And to see somebody like that already wind up in the Elite League kind of makes you think, like, oh, has he really dropped that low down the depth charts, or did Guildford just find a diamond in the rough? What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, he has been playing for JHT in Finland. So he's played, 8 games for them, .908 save percentage. Interestingly, that Guildford came out and they said it was always our plan to have a third netminder, so, no one's injured, don't panic.
No, exactly. Yeah.
And they've played Travis Fullerton in every single game.
He's going to need some rest at some point.
And he's got an 89.47% save percentage.
Which isn't exactly, like, break the bank kind of save percentage, is it?
No. And so, but I mean, obviously he hasn't played this season yet, has Walter Peters, but also neither has Michael Will, who was the backup anyway, Mike Will.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, if I was Will, I'd perhaps be feeling a little bit concerned that they feel the need to bring in another netminder.
But then again, I would argue it could just be healthy competition.
Well, it could be, yes.
Like, I don't think there's anything worse than an athlete feeling too comfortable with the job that they have. And the reason I say that is because then, of course, it depends on the athlete. Some, or a lot of athletes, especially hockey players, just want to win. They don't care how many points they score, how many trophies they win, individual trophies, as long as they win the awards at the end of the season with their team, lift the end of season trophy, that's what they care about. Which is good. That's very admirable. That's what you want from a hockey player on a team sport. I think that bringing in a third goaltender, Paul Dixon knows what he's doing. He's a very capable coach. He's shown that since he joined the Elite League and before that, So I think him bringing in a third goaltender, especially one that's young, only 21 years old, he can go, look, our goaltending might not have been that much up. Of course, it's been okay. Travis Fullerton's been a decent goaltender, but a .89 save percentage isn't going to cut it. It's not going to cut it if you want to be able to compete for a championship. So, whilst Fullerton is the starter, have a bit of competition for that second and third spot. If Peters steps up as a 21-year-old backup, then the signing's perfect. That's what you want. Like, I feel like this could make all of the goaltenders better. And plus, Peters is getting some experience with a senior league. He's not a scrub by any stretch of the imagination. He's played in some junior academies for some very highbrow organizations. So, and he's been drafted into the NHL. Like, the Chicago Blackhawks own his contract rights. So, he's not a guy that, like, is a horrible hockey player. It's not as if they brought him in differently to Sheffield's pickup as injury cover, like you mentioned. They've always wanted to have 3 goaltenders. I think this is to do with healthy competition, and fair play to them, I think.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add?
No, not really. I'm conscious of we've got a lot to get through,
okay.
So...
Sure. So,
no, not really.
The second signing of this week was Peters, the Belgian netminder, just in case you were wondering. Now we move on to the Nottingham Panthers, who have had players leave. I was about to say one player in, one player out, but that's not the case. There's 2 players out.
It's 2 players out.
Chris, just kind of sum up to us before I get into this, because I want to preface this by saying Chris did his first interview with BBC with head coach of the Panthers, Tim Wallace, this weekend. So he's had the chance to actually talk to Tim Wallace in person about how he felt, especially about the games against Sheffield this last weekend. So, Chris, what was the feeling you got from Tim Wallace about this team?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to him on Saturday night after the home game.
Yeah.
So, and naturally, of course, he wasn't happy. I didn't speak to him for very long, but I mean, that's 4 in a row and losing to Sheffield.
Yeah.
He wasn't happy. He'd mentioned the week before that some players needed to up their game after the games against Glasgow. And he mentioned that again in my interview with him on Saturday night, that some players really needed to kind of up their game. And after the game on Sunday, where they were 3-1 up with 5 minutes to go in the third period, and then they somehow managed to lose from there, including giving away a silly goal short-handed.
Yeah.
Then I can see why he's made moves, and credit to the Panthers for not sticking at it until it's potentially too late.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, 5-6 weeks into the season, this is of course, I've always said on this podcast, like, you don't want to make rash decisions and do it too early, but like 6 weeks, 2 months into the season, like, that's kind of the opportune time to do something like this, or at least that's what I think anyway. Based on, because of course I'm a Nottingham Panthers fan first, I keep an eye on the Panthers more so than most of the other teams in the Elite League. So I've noticed the players that aren't playing well. I've noticed the guys that aren't putting points on the board when they were brought in to do exactly that. But one of them has been less so about the team getting rid of them or wanting to move on from them, and him wanting to move on himself. So Nottingham Panthers forward, is it Alexis? Is that how you pronounce it?
Alexis Lucio.
Yeah, Alexis Lucio. Thank you, Chris. He's not Belgian, just in case you were wondering. He has decided to retire from ice hockey. So this was a very big announcement for the Panthers organisation. He decided it was a couple of days ago, I believe. This article was written on Friday, so just before the weekend, it was announced that he decided to retire from playing the sport, and he's headed home to Canada, which means that he has left the Nottingham Panthers organisation immediately. Bearing in mind, this wasn't just I haven't played very well, so I'm leaving. It's more he's been struggling with an injury for the last few weeks, and it's clearly had a bigger impact on him than he initially thought.
Yeah, so he hasn't. His last game was the 5 game on September the 15th. He hasn't played for the last. Well, he hadn't played for the last 2 weekends.
Yeah.
So he missed the cup game against Manchester, the shutout at Belfast, and then the 2 home games against Glasgow. And then that was an upper body injury he got. And then he's decided to retire. Panthers, yeah, I mean, injuries are not. I mean, they lost Adam Deutsch. He went off in the warm-up on Sunday against Sheffield. So we don't yet know what the situation is with him and how. I mean, it could be a week, it could be horrible.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't know what the problem was. And now it was announced this afternoon that another player has gone as well.
Speaking of which, nice segue. So the Nottingham Panthers, this was more of a mutual decision, time to move on. More of this, Tim Wallace and Guy Doucette saying we need to make changes here. So following back-to-back losses this weekend for the Nottingham Panthers, they've decided to make some changes to their roster. This is according to the Elite League website, which they're not wrong. So forward Jens Jacobs has been released from the Nottingham Panthers organisation. They wanted to make it very clear that it was a mutual understanding. That I've got a quote here from Guy Doucette here that says, "Things haven't worked out for him here, but by no means are we suggesting he's to blame for our recent results." He didn't really put up many points, so that's up for debate. Not him completely, but I feel like he's part of that. Just saying. It's a team sport, what do you expect? It just wasn't a great fit for either party, and the relationship has come to an end. He is a thoroughly professional individual, and the club wishes him well as he moves back home to Sweden to look for his next move. And then it goes on to Guy Doucette talking about how they're going to look at more. They've now got 2 vacancies for imports on the roster, which kind of sucks 6 weeks into the season because quite a lot of the best of the crop have already gone. You're kind of. This sounds worse than it is, but it's like you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel at who's left, which can be good because you can find a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, you can.
But at the same time, I guess what I'm trying to say is you're limited in the options that you have, because most of the players that, if you were thinking to pick a guy like Jacobs or Loiseau before the season started, you may have had other players on your list that now that these 2 have gone you would have wanted to go for, but they're already playing for another team in another league. So it sucks, but I like the fact, as a Panthers fan personally, that they're making these moves at this time. Like, we don't want them to have an awful month of December like they always do. They're kind of starting off the season pretty rough. They're kind of hitting rock bottom early so they can jump up the standings for the rest of the season, which I would prefer rather than they get off to a hot streak and then spend the rest of the year struggling. But then again, you don't want the damage to be too much too early. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here with the Panthers, who they bring in, how quickly they bring them in, what sort of caliber players they bring in. Do you have any sort of feeling on when they're going to bring in any players? I know you don't have any inside information on this. This is just purely
No, I don't have anything. No, I don't have anything. I mean, Chris Ellis is chatting to Tim now, but I think it's going to be soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the one thing I like the fact that they've made the move quickly. They've not waited for it to get extremely bad.
It's literally the day after their most recent loss.
Yeah, exactly.
They've moved so quickly to be like, this isn't working. Which some people might see like, oh, is that a bit too rash? Is that a bit too hasty? Is this more of an emotional move than a sort of logical move? But I don't think so. Because
because this has been going on for nearly a month because they're on they haven't won since the 15th. And Tim and Guy have got a lot of experience between them across North America and in Europe and in the UK. So I'm confident that they're not going to rush and panic sign somebody, and they're going to get somebody or two players who they believe are going to make an impact into the side. Obviously, they signed Jacobs thinking he was going to make more of an impact into the side than he did. Of course, you never really know.
No.
If you knew that someone was going to put up 40, 50 points, then every team would want to sign them if it was a dead cert.
Of course, you're going based purely off their previous record, their resume.
And it's a different league and
just
different
for a bit
everything.
of context, thanks to Chris's wonderful spreadsheet that he's got of all the teams and all of the stats, Jacobs, however he's called, he scored 1 goal this season, and that's it.
Yeah, away at Guildford.
He scored 1 goal, and they've played, 12 games total?
6, 8, 10, 11 now.
11 games, he scored 1 goal. And no assists, just 1 goal. So, you need a guy like that to either step up or leave. It's just the way it works. So, those are all of the player transactions in terms of players joining and leaving the league. So, I'm sure we'll see a lot more. I would imagine it will continue to be drip-fed players probably until about Christmas. And then that's when we'll see, the final rosters for the season start to take shape. Because, of course, you have the start of the season final rosters, and then you have the mid-season final rosters. It's not a transfer deadline, but it kind of is like a transfer deadline, because you want all of your players on the roster ready and playing well by Christmas. Because then you've got the rest of the year.
You don't want to be changing players in February just before the playoffs.
Exactly. So, now we move on to suspensions. The Department of Player Safety. They're back, guys. You think you get rid of them and they come back with another suspension. So, this suspension has already been served. It was handed out, or it was made official on October the 2nd, which was last Wednesday. And it was given to Fife Flyers. Yeah, I can't talk today, Chris. I don't know what's wrong with me. So, it's Fife Flyers. He's not Belgian. Forward, Danik Gauthier, I believe that's his name. He received a 1-game suspension for slew-footing, and the key references that they mentioned, it was a slew-foot. There was a leg sweep made from behind the player that was slew-footed. The upper body was in front to create an opposite motion from the leg sweep, and it was classed as Category 1 careless. The suspension has already been served. It was a 1-game suspension earlier this week, so I would imagine the Saturday game that they played, it would have knocked out if they did play Saturday.
It was on the 5th. So what happened was the incident was on a week last Saturday, the 28th, away at Belfast. Obviously, they didn't have time to review everything until the Sunday game, so he played in that. They then announced it on the 2nd, so he missed the game away at Glasgow on Saturday, which they lost by 3-2, and then he was back for the home game against Dundee last night.
And I don't know if you've seen the Department of Player Safety's video. It was very clearly a slew foot. He stuck his foot behind the player, pushed him into his foot, he went down. It was a slew foot. He deserved the 1-game suspension, and this is the 2nd straight week we've had a player done for slew footing. So I believe I sent it to you when it first came out, Chris, and your immediate reaction was, well, at least they're being consistent. Which is exactly what you want.
Brett Ferguson got a 1-game suspension for slew footing against Fife.
Yeah.
The slew foots, they were the same pretty much. They looked the same on video. They've got the same suspension.
Yeah.
So neither repeat offenders, anything like that. So Department of Player Safety, well done. You're consistent, and that's what we want.
And that's all the fans want, is for the Department of Player Safety to be consistent with the calls that they give. So good job. I really feel like they have taken a step up recently, especially since the start of the season. Like, they don't feel like they have to give out a suspension if there isn't one that's warranted. But then again, if there is one, it's fair. Like, a 1-game suspension for a slew foot, that makes sense. That's good. Okay, so we move away from the Department of Player Safety. Very brief visit from the Department of Player Safety this week, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I guess it's for you to decide. So, we have Player of the Week for Week 5 in the Elite League. This was the previous week. It was announced on October 1st, so last Tuesday, because they seem to announce them either the day after we do the podcast or 5 minutes after the podcast ends, which is really great. Thanks, Elite League. I appreciate that. We're basically like a week behind. But I will just mention that the Player of the Week for Week 5, we're technically just finished Week 6, bearing in mind. For Week 5 is the Coventry Blaze forward Jan Lakkonen. The 37-year-old forward joined the Blaze this season, and he's played in Kazakhstan, Belarus, France and Poland over the past 4 seasons. But he scored 2 goals in his side's win over the Manchester Storm, where he also got an assist as well. So he's been a big part of them generating offense. He scored a pair of goals, which you can never complain with from an import player in an elite league game. So fair play to Lakkonen. Anything you want to add on that? It's kind of old news now, unfortunately. But
yeah, I mean, it was a 6-4 win over Manchester. He contributed well. What do you say? It was two goals, 1 assist. They had a part in half of the goals. So yeah, a good showing from him and a good call. No one jumped out at me as being having a better weekend. I know we've had before that I was like, well, I would have actually given it to this person because they scored like 2 more goals and got an extra assist.
It was quite a quiet weekend, you know.
It wasn't. Yeah, no one really lit up. Happy with that, and congratulations.
Absolutely, and it's like the offense was very much spread out throughout the team. There wasn't like a guy putting up 5 points on one night, whereas like compared to some of the other weeks we've had a goalie make 40, 50 saves or stuff like that. And then from Player of the Week, we now move to Player of the Month for the month of September, of course. The month of September has recently ended. We're just about a week into October. So the way the Elite League does this, for those of you who have either forgotten or don't know how it works, they usually put up a poll on both Facebook and Twitter, and then they collect the results, and the player with the most votes, you don't have to have a majority or anything, just the player with the most votes, the highest percentage, wins the award of Player of the Month. And it's taken from the 4 or 5 players the month before that had won Player of the Week awards, which I like. I like the fact that it takes it from that group. So, the Player of the Month for the first month of the Elite League 1920 season, the month of September, is Dundee Stars forward Kevin Dufour. Yay!
Whoop, whoop.
So, the 27-year-old forward put up 12 points in 10 games so far this season, including 7 goals, so he's almost a goal a game. He was voted Player of the Week 4 after scoring 4 goals in one weekend, and he earned 37.75% of the vote in total. Just to give you a bit of context, Adam Morrison came in second with 32.69%, Tyson Fawcett won 20.88%, Jan Lakkonen won 5.94%, and Elgin Pearce won 2.73%. So, very close between 1 and 2, and then as you get to the bottom, barely any votes for some of the other ones. But Kevin Dufour, wins that, so fair play to him. But now, we've got some news. Before we move on to the Icing on the Skate podcast players of the week, just a quick bit of news that's relevant to later on in the season. The Elite League announced recently when playoff finals weekend will be taking place. It shall be taking place at Nottingham's Motorpoint Arena once more. So, for those of you expecting it or wanting it to go somewhere else, it's staying where it's been for the last few years. So, make sure if you want to go, it's in Nottingham. Don't think it's anywhere else. And the playoff finals weekend is taking place on Saturday the 11th of April and Sunday the 12th of April. So the quarterfinals take place on the Saturday, and the third place game and the final takes place on the Sunday. So 11th and 12th of April at Nottingham is where the playoff finals is this weekend. So if you're wondering where it is, or you forget, just watch this section of the podcast. You are welcome. But anyway, so players of the week. The Icing on the Skate players of the week. Which are the more important players of the week? Because we have fun with this. It's fun, why not? Because the Elite League have to go for like the proper option. We can go for the silly choices. Or somebody that might not get the attention they deserve after an incredible week. So, Chris, did you go first last week or did I go first last week?
You went first because then I celebrated about the Lions.
You did. Now, I'm hoping, Chris, this time you've actually chosen a single player.
I have.
So, after you.
I have gone for Glasgow Clan's Mikael Lidhammer. He has 2 goals and 2 assists over the course of the weekend and a +4 on the plus-minus. And that was obviously in their wins over Fife and Manchester. So with a 2+2 and a +4, I've gone for Mikael Lidhammer.
Perfect. And for my choice for the Icing on the Skate podcast player of the week, I have gone with the Cardiff Devils, Joey Haddad. Why not? Let's go for Haddad. And here's why. Here's why I went for Joey Haddad. He scored a pair of goals in Saturday's game against Manchester. And then he went scoreless in the Sunday game against Coventry, but put up 14 penalty minutes. So
yes, he's going to be hearing from the Department of Player Safety because he had a 2+10 for check to the head.
Oh, really?
So he's going to be hearing from the Department of Player Safety on that one.
Okay, then we might have something else. The Department of Player Safety might be back for their weekly segment next week, folks. But my one's Joey Haddad. He scores a pair of goals, gets himself 14 penalty minutes. I mean, it sucks there's a check to the head, obviously, but he was 1 assist away from a Gordie Howe hat-trick for the weekend, so, why not? So that concludes almost everything for the Elite League. We have one more thing to go through, which is, of course, Chris's weekly quiz, which he's already told me before we started this that I'm screwed. So
it's not all Elite League now because the NHL started.
Oh, good point, which will be a nice segue after the play under review. So nice. So yeah, go for it. 3 questions. Okay. Let's hear it.
Right. Easy question. You've mentioned this already.
Okay.
The Nottingham Panthers have today said goodbye to Jens Jacobs. How many goals has he scored for the club this season?
1.
Correct. 1 point.
I love that I always get the easy question and the rest of them I'm screwed.
Right. Medium.
Okay.
Right. Which Elite League side has taken the most penalties this season? This is excluding Champions Hockey League games. You get a point for you get 2 points if you get the team, and then I'll give you a bonus point if you're within 5 of the right number.
So, can I ask a question in response?
Go on then.
You've mentioned Champions Hockey League games, so is it one of those 2 teams?
I'm not telling you.
Well, otherwise you wouldn't have mentioned it. I'm going to go with the Cardiff Devils.
No.
No? Really?
No, because they have the most penalties, but they don't. That includes the Champions Hockey League games.
I see. Okay. So what was
do you
Belfast?
Do you want to guess it? Do you want to guess at the number? Just to. It's not Belfast either.
So why did you mention? Oh, you're tricking me.
I'm not tricking you,
Chris. I'm gonna say that they have 84 penalty minutes.
Oh, you're outside the 5 either way. It's Sheffield. They have 75.
Oh, it was close, though, on the penalty minutes, though.
It's not penalty minutes. It was penalties taken.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Okay, fine. Right. No, good to know.
So
Sheffield, stop taking...
Cardiff have the most. They're on 76, but some of those were in the Champions Hockey
I
League.
see. Okay, my mistake.
So, right.
And
This
that
is your
wasn't the hard question? Okay.
This is your NHL question.
Oh, shit. Here we go.
Right.
Okay.
So, you'll get your 3 points if you get the right number,
Okay.
and then bonus points.
Okay.
How many NHL teams have won a game so far this season?
Oh.
And I'll give you a bonus point if you can name at least 3/4 of them, but you only have 3 lives. So get 3 wrong and that's it.
Okay, so I will preface this by saying, as I was setting up for the podcast, I did look at the standings of the NHL. So I do know a little bit. I don't know all of the teams. It's a quick
Okay,
glance.
go slowly enough so that I can tick these off.
Okay, so... shall we go with how many teams first?
The first thing is how many teams have won a game so far this season. Bear in mind there's 31 in the league.
Won a game so far this season. I am going to say... 17.
Oh, no, 21.
Really? 21 already?
21. So if you can name 16 of them, I'll give you a bonus point.
Okay, so... Carolina.
Yep.
Washington.
Yep.
Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Toronto.
Yep.
Montreal.
Yep.
The Rangers.
Yep.
The Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yep.
Buffalo.
Yes.
The Bruins.
Yes.
Shout out to Brits on Bruins. That's 9. So I need
That's
what?
9.
7 more?
Yeah, you need 16, yeah.
The Red Wings.
Yes.
Yes. Now I'm starting to struggle a little bit. I'm trying to remember all the teams that are in the NHL. Vegas.
Yes.
Shout out to Brits on Bruins. I was gonna say that team, but I'm not sure about them.
You get 3 lives. You've got 3 lives.
Yeah, but I could save that one for later. It's not a problem.
Okay, yeah. You need 5.
I need 5 more.
And you've got 10 left.
I've got 10. So I need 5 more teams out of 10 that are still available.
Out of 10, yes.
Okay. I'm trying to remember which teams are in which division now. It's really confusing me. I was going to say them, but I'm not sure about them either. Florida. Have Florida won one?
Yes.
Okay, good.
They've won 1.
I wasn't sure about them. Who else? Colorado.
Yes.
Okay, good. I was a little bit worried about that one.
You need another 3.
I'm going to guess Dallas.
No, that's 1 life gone.
No, okay, I wasn't sure. I knew they lost to the Bruins. I wasn't sure if they'd played since and if they'd won since. The Philadelphia Flyers.
Yes.
They won the Global Series game.
You need another 2.
Need another 2. Oh, I'm trying to remember which teams I haven't mentioned. Oh, no. I need 2 more. The New York Islanders.
Yes, 1 more.
Okay, good. Right, I'm gonna...
You've got 2 lives, so you may as well guess some.
I'm gonna go with a guess. The Arizona Coyotes, have they won one yet?
No, that's 2 lives.
I'm gonna go with the Nashville Predators.
Yes!
Yeah,
bonus
buddy!
points!
Yeah!
Right, if I've got everything correct here, the ones you missed
were
Toronto.
No, I mentioned Toronto.
Oh, did you mention Toronto?
I did
okay.
mention Toronto.
You missed Anaheim.
Yeah, okay. Yep. I wasn't sure.
Edmonton.
McDavid working his magic again.
St. Louis.
Of course. Oh, yeah. Because they lost against Washington in the opening game. Okay, fine.
Calgary.
Right.
And Winnipeg.
Oh, of course, because they had the big comeback against New Jersey, didn't they? Okay, fair enough. So, I actually got one of the hard questions. I've been
screaming Colorado through all of this. God, it took you long enough.
I got it. I always think Eastern Conference first because I follow the Rangers. I mean, it's a good day to be a Rangers fan, except that we've got to wait till Saturday for hockey games.
So you got the easy one. You missed it, so that's 1 point, and then you didn't get the hard question, but I'll give you 2 for getting the teams. So you got 3 points.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. So, let's quickly talk about the Challenge Cup. So before we move on to the NHL and all of the little notes and stuff that take place there.
Yeah, because that's quite quick, isn't it?
Exactly. So the play under review, for those of you who don't know, it's a topic that we pick that's more of a debate between myself and Chris. Not that we don't debate everything already, but it's more of a chance for us to sit down and talk about a topic in more detail that's more related to the way British hockey works, some of the standings, stuff that happens in some of the lower leagues, a controversial piece of information that comes out. So the Challenge Cup, once again this year, is confusing as hell. So, Chris, explain it to me.
Yeah, the thing that gets me with the Challenge Cup this year is last year, when there were 11 teams, yeah, it had to be a little bit awkward. This year it doesn't, and yet it still is.
Yeah.
So the Challenge Cup, the 10 teams are split into 3 groups, and the ones amongst you who are good at maths will realise that 10 into 3 doesn't go equally.
Doesn't it?
No. So there is one team of 4, one group of 4, and 2 groups of 3.
I see.
Now, the group of 4 is Group A, which is Belfast and the 3 Scottish sides.
Indeed it is.
And they have about finished their group. And the way Group A works is that the bottom team are eliminated and the other 3 teams go through.
Okay.
So, simple enough. Now, Dundee have already qualified as group winners.
Okay.
And Glasgow are qualified, but we don't know where yet.
Right.
And the reasoning on that is that so the only game that's left is Glasgow against Belfast.
Okay.
And so one of them's got to win 2 points.
Yeah.
At least.
Which will put them in second place.
Yes. Now, if Belfast win the game and get the 2 points, same regulation, Glasgow will still be ahead of Fife on the tiebreaker, the head-to-head tiebreaker, because Glasgow beat Fife in the Cup 3-2 both times they played them.
Yeah.
Now, it's at Glasgow, so I think Fife are out. No, they're not out. If
the fact that you weren't sure about that doesn't fill me with much hope, Chris.
If Belfast lose, Belfast are out.
Right.
Only if they lose in regulation, because of course it's then points.
Okay.
Because they have fewer points won away, which is number 5 of the knockout stages.
Okay.
Because Belfast haven't won away,
right,
and Fife got 2 points away at Dundee.
I see.
So if Glasgow win in regulation, Belfast are out the Challenge Cup.
Okay.
I think.
Right.
If I'm right, I think I'm right.
And if Glasgow lose?
If Glasgow lose, then Belfast and Glasgow are through.
Okay.
So the only way Fife can get through is if Glasgow beat Belfast in regulation. So,
to sum that up, it's a Belfast versus Fife battling for third place.
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
Well, it's Belfast. But if Belfast win, they go second. So one of those two aren't going to make it.
Okay, right. So that sums up Group A. I feel like that's the one that makes the most sense.
Yes, to a point.
So Group B. Let's move on to that.
Group B: Cardiff, Guildford, and Coventry.
Yeah.
Top 2 go through.
Okay.
Bottom side go into the play-in fixture.
Got it. So to be honest, it doesn't really matter where you place because you still have a chance to be in the semi-finals or the next round.
Correct. Group C.
Who comes up with that idea? Who sits there in an elite league boardroom and goes, you know what, guys? Let's have a section where if you lose all of your games in the Challenge Cup group stage, you still have the chance to go through to the next round. And then everybody goes, that's a brilliant idea. Let's put that in the rulebook for this year. Like, who sits there and decides that? Oh!
Group C: Sheffield, Nottingham, Manchester. Again, same thing. Top 2 through. Yep. Third place, play-in fixture.
Yep.
So the 2 teams in the play-in fixture, that's a one-off game.
Yep.
And whoever has the better win percentage of those two sides gets it at home.
Okay. So it's not like a decision. It's like you play where you want.
No, it's
Is
whoever
okay.
whoever has the highest win percentage,
Makes
which at the
sense.
moment would be Coventry
Coventry,
over
yeah.
Manchester,
Because Manchester have only played 3 games in the Challenge Cup, so
and they've won one, so they've got a
yep,
33% win percentage, whereas
yep,
Coventry have won 2 from 5, so they've got a 40% win percentage.
yep.
So it would be at Coventry.
Right. Okay.
Now we get into. So Group A is almost finished.
Perfect.
Group B runs until. Group C runs until the early November.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that finishes on November the 3rd.
So
Group C.
so so remind me. Group B and C play 8 games, don't they? Not
They
6.
do. Yes.
So Sheffield still has 2 Challenge Cup games to play. Nottingham have 3, and Manchester have 5.
Yes. So
Wow. Okay.
I've lost
In a
it. Okay.
month.
So Sheffield have got to play Manchester twice,
Okay.
and Nottingham have got to play Manchester 3 times.
Wow. Okay.
Because Nottingham and Sheffield have played their 4 games against each
Yes.
other.
Okay.
In Group B and C, nothing is decided yet. There's still too many points on offer.
Right.
But Group B finishes on November the 9th, Group C on November the 3rd, bearing in mind that
Wow.
Group A finishes next week.
November the 9th.
November the
Which
9th.
My memory's terrible with this sort of stuff, but when does the group stage usually finish in the Elite League?
Maybe around the same time, but we don't normally have to have this play-in fixture.
And we don't have that many group games, do we?
We have done before when it was two groups of 5. It was 8 games. It was home and away once,
Which makes sense.
which I don't understand why they didn't do it this year.
Because that would be the easy thing to do, Chris. And what have we learnt about the Elite League? They like to make so many good improvements in so many different ways, and then they pick one thing and go, let's just make that really silly. Why not?
Well, the other thing you've got to remember is that not only do Group A have to wait a month for Groups B and C to finish,
Yeah.
they then have to find out who's in the bottom spots. Then they have to go who's got the best win percentage. Then they have to go to that team and say, when can you play the fixture?
Yeah.
Because if Manchester were to win the games against Sheffield, Panthers will be bottom. Well, the arena's used for everything under the sun.
Yeah.
So then they've got to find a date to play the fixture. It then has to work with the team in Group B. They then have to play it. Then the seedings have to be worked out. And then they can do the draw.
You know what? I just think we need to bring back Milton Keynes, and we need to bring back Edinburgh, and let's make it easier. Let's make it less confusing. Like, I know why it's called the Challenge Cup now, because it's a bloody challenge to actually get the thing finished. Like, come on! It doesn't make any sense.
The other thing to point out is that teams are ranked. This is the one thing that I don't like about it. Teams are ranked on win percentage.
Oh, this is the one thing you don't like about it, is it, Chris?
Teams are ranked on win percentage.
Right.
Which is okay. So Dundee are already guaranteed, because of the fact they've won 5 out of 6, that they are going to be seeded number 1.
Okay.
Because even if Cardiff and Sheffield win their remaining games, they can't catch up.
Yeah.
So Dundee are ranked number 1.
Okay.
The other 2 group winners are going to be ranked 2 and 3 based on their win percentage.
Okay.
Which at the moment for Sheffield is it regulation time wins first, or is it all wins? No, just win percentage. So it's Sheffield.
Why is it so confusing?
So Sheffield are on 0.67, Cardiff are on 0.60. So at the minute it's Sheffield 2, Cardiff 3.
Right.
And then the other team who comes in 4th obviously gets the last, whoever's left, from pick your own opponent.
Do you know what I'm starting to think here, Chris? If we sat here and, like, figured all of this out, we might be done by the time the cup's actually lifted. You know, like that. It just doesn't make any sense.
The thing that annoys me, and I think could annoy a team if it comes to it, is that if a team is tied on win percentage, so say Glasgow finish So say Glasgow win this game against Belfast and they finish with 3 wins from 6 games.
Okay.
And then whoever comes second in Group B or C also wins half of their games.
Yep.
The first tie-breaking criteria is number of points, which Glasgow have a better opportunity of getting because they've played more games. And if they were to have an overtime loss, they would have. Because if Glasgow if say Guildford win half of their 8 games, they've got 8 points. If Glasgow win half of their 6 games, they've only got 6 points.
Yeah.
So
basically, I can't wait till this is done, so my brain doesn't hurt anymore. There you go.
I remember this last year. I understand it a lot better than last year, but I still don't think it makes sense.
But then again, like, you've sat there and gone through it. Like, you shouldn't need to do that. It should just be as simple as, like you've mentioned, 2 groups of 5. The top 2 or 3 teams go through. Like,
the one request I have from the Elite League to the Elite League, well, I have 2. One is put special team percentages on the game sheets, and 2, on the Challenge Cup standings, if you're deciding the rankings by win percentage, can we have a win percentage column, not a points percentage column, please? Because points percentage includes overtime losses, which aren't in the criteria for deciding rankings. So can we please have win percentage rather than points percentage?
That sounds like a fabulous idea, Chris. Next year, figure out the website for them, please. just be like, look, the Challenge Cup doesn't make any sense, boys. So let's figure this out and make it as unconfusing as possible, and then everyone will be happy, and then I don't have to sit here every week and get confused about it.
The other thing I don't understand, and I know why they've done it kind of geographically, but if they've done it to try and save games and time and what have you, why are 6 out of the 10 teams playing the same number of games as you would in 2 groups of 5 anyway?
Exactly.
Why not just have the 2 groups of 5, top 4 from each group go through, and top of Group A plays 4th in Group B, and top of Group B plays 4th in Group A, and blah de blah.
Yeah. So
that would make sense to me. But...
So because we've still got about a month of the Challenge Cup, just to round up all of that confusion, we haven't got anything completely set in stone yet, other than the
only thing set in stone is that Dundee will be seeded number 1 out of every single team, and Glasgow are definitely through, but we don't know 2nd or 3rd yet.
And
if they're going to be in 2nd or 3rd.
With Group B and Group C, there's still too many games to decide.
Yes, anything can happen in Group B and C. No one's set anywhere.
There you go. So, let's run away from that confusing stuff as quick as possible, and we'll run all the way across the pond to the NHL. Oh, look at that segue. So, the National Hockey League, the 1920 season has now begun, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes!
It's finally here. Yes, NHL hockey is back. I love it. So, I'm just going to, like we did last season, I'll run through the standings in league as opposed to division and conference. You guys can look up that stuff for yourself. I'm just looking at the teams that are on good streaks, teams that are on bad streaks, and just kind of having a look at the teams that are doing well. Then we'll have some news to go through with the NHL. We've got some little tidbits here that we can have a look at. And then we'll move on to some other stuff. So, the NHL, the Carolina Hurricanes currently take the first spot with 6 points in 3 games. They are undefeated so far this season. Most recently, a 4-3 victory against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Second are the Toronto Maple Leafs with 5 points in 3 games. However, they did have a really, really big comeback defeat against the Montreal Canadiens, which sounded like an incredible game. I would have wanted to watch that one. The Washington Capitals take third with 5 points. They have the exact same record, 2-0-1. Overtime loss for Toronto and Washington. Buffalo are in 4th with 4 points. Then you have Vegas, the New York Rangers, Mika Zibanejad, Colorado, Detroit, Anaheim, Edmonton, Boston, all on 4 points. What's deciding it is the goal difference and whether they won them in regulation or overtime. It depends on all that stuff. Of course, very early on in the season, so a lot of teams are going to
it doesn't really matter at this point.
Exactly. So that goes from 4th place to 11th place. Then in 12th, 13th, and 14th, all with 3 points, you have the St. Louis Blues, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Then with 2 points, you have quite a few teams: the Flyers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the New York Islanders, Nashville, Calgary, Florida, and Winnipeg. With 1 point, you have the New Jersey Devils, who've gone off to a bit of a shaky start. Their most recent game was a 7-2 loss against the Buffalo Sabres. And then, with 0 points, makes up the rest of the teams, some of which have played 1 game, some of which have played 2, and a couple have even played 3. You've got the LA Kings, the Chicago Blackhawks, the Arizona Coyotes, the Vancouver Canucks, the Minnesota Wild, the Ottawa Senators, who look terrible this year, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Dallas Stars, and the San Jose Sharks. 2 of the surprising ones to start the year badly. Dallas most recently losing thanks to 4 goals by Anthony Mantha, saving a bit of Chris's fantasy hockey for this season. But we'll get into that a little bit later.
So what?
You know Anthony Mantha's on your fantasy hockey team who scored 4 goals last night, right?
No.
Shows how much you've been paying attention.
Looked at it. Honestly, I've not looked at it.
The San Jose Sharks take a 3-1 loss against the Anaheim Ducks. So they're a team very much rebuilding and have a lot of their key guys out with injuries. So good job there, San Jose. You're looking great this year. Pavelski going has hit you worse than you thought. And Martin Jones is my goaltender for fantasy hockey, so thanks for that. Appreciate it. So, those are the standings in the NHL at the moment. Mika Zibanejad taking the first start of the week. 8 points in the first 2 games of the season. He had a hat-trick against Ottawa for the first hat-trick of the 1920 season. What a game it was. Mika Zibanejad with Artemi Panarin and Pavel Buchnevich. What a line. I'm just so happy that the Rangers are playing well. It's 2 games into the season, of course. Very early days. They played Saturday. They don't play till next Saturday, which is an awful way to figure out the schedule, NHL. Just by the way, I want to watch Rangers hockey. Come on. Help me out here, guys.
Yeah, but nobody else does, so...
Oh, I mean, they're one of the most popular teams in the league, but sure, whatever. They're better than the Maple Leafs, anyway.
I think the league begs to differ.
I mean, Toronto, they've got a cup-capable team, but, let's wait another 50 years to find out. So, anyway, let's move on to some of the news that's taken place in the NHL over the last week. The first of which being Blackhawks forward Alex DeBrincat signing a 3-year, $19.2 million contract extension to remain with the Chicago Blackhawks. He scored 69 goals the past 2 years, and yeah, I think he's absolutely capable or worthy of a contract extension like that. He earns $5.1 million for the first 2 years, then he earns $9 million in the third year, which for those of you who don't understand how that works, having the last year of the contract be worth a lot more money compared to the other years makes it so if they go to arbitration, or if they're still a restricted free agent, or if they are looking for a certain amount, that if it goes to arbitration, the starting amount is the $9 million as opposed to the $5.1 million that they may have earned the first 2 years of the contract. So it's kind of... this is why they're bridge contracts. We've seen many players sign bridge contracts these last few seasons, and especially early this year. We talked about, I think, half a dozen of them last episode, or last podcast. So it means that he will probably still be a restricted free agent once this contract ends. Once it goes to arbitration, he is already guaranteed at least $9 million in average annual value. So, fair play to him. It's a smart move to make for him. He's making a fair amount of money, I wouldn't complain. But Chris, what do you think about DeBrincat re-signing or signing an extension with the Blackhawks?
I wish I got $6.4 million at 22.
Me too.
Well, yeah, I wish if I would just tried a bit harder to learn to skate. I mean, I never tried to learn to skate, but
I've skated twice in my life, so if you want to give me like a $750,000 a year contract, I'll take it.
But yeah, I mean, I think the Blackhawks have been smart in, as you said, making that final year higher.
Yeah.
Because it kind of protects them from people who might, at $5 million would have gone for it, at $9 million might not.
Yeah.
So I think it protects him. Smart move, and obviously good for him to be on a contract of that caliber at 21.
And bearing in mind, the deal runs through till the end of the 22-23 season, so he's still on his entry-level contract this year. He'll then roll over into this extension for the next 3 years. And he's a guy that many people thought might not be able to be a legitimate player in the league because of his size and his stature. We've seen it with several different players, the Martin St. Louis, the Alex DeBrincats. Like, you've seen these guys, just because they're small guys, just because, or Elias Pettersson last year, for example, just because you're not like a fully muscled out, right size player, doesn't mean you can't contribute on an NHL team. And Alex DeBrincat has found a way to do that, so fair play to him. Granted, he's playing with some pretty decent players in Chicago, with the likes of Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves, who, Patrick Kane's coming off a 100-plus point season last year. He scored the third or fourth most goals of any player in the NHL last year. So he's a guy that hasn't slowed down, and having a young winger on that line has obviously helped them quite a lot, so fair play to him. Then we move on to one guy getting a contract extension, one guy deciding to hang up his skates. And that is forward Lee Stepniak. So Lee Stepniak has retired after 14 seasons in the NHL with 10 different teams. Most of you will know him as a real journeyman of the National Hockey League. He kind of became Mr. Trade Deadline, did Lee Stepniak. He always seemed to be traded to somewhere at the trade deadline.
Was it St. Louis, Toronto, Phoenix, Calgary, Pittsburgh, New York, Winnipeg, New Jersey, Boston, Carolina?
Yep, exactly. So he's played in a lot of places. He played 2 games last season with the Bruins, which was his last play in the NHL. He scored 203 goals and 266 assists in 911 games. So Lee Stepniak,
and that's obviously just in the regular season as well.
Exactly. So congratulations on a great career, Lee Stepniak. I quite liked you when you were with the Rangers. You weren't there for very long. We traded you very quickly. But from what I remember of you being with the Rangers, I quite enjoyed you being there. And of course, you were always picked up at the trade deadline. I'll never forget every year reading, oh, Lee Stepniak's been traded again. Fair enough. Like, seeing him be moved to another team to add some depth into the roster, add another two-way player who can put up some points on the board. So, fair play to him. Like, good job, Lee Stepniak. Then we have Chris Phillips, the former defenseman of the Ottawa Senators, is having his number 4 retired by the Ottawa Senators organization on February 18th, 2020. So, he's obviously incredibly humbled by something like this. He played a Senators record 1,179 NHL games with the Senators, finishing with 288 points, and that was over 17 seasons in the league. And bearing in mind, he was the number 1 overall pick in the 1996 NHL entry draft, which was the year I was born, to give you some context to all that.
What was that, 96?
Yeah, 96. And,
yeah, same as me.
Yeah, and he played in his final NHL game on February 5th, 2015. The ceremony is going to take place before the game against the Buffalo Sabres on February 18th, 2020, and it will be the 3rd number retired by the Ottawa Senators franchise, joining number 8, Frank Finnegan, who was part of the original Ottawa Senators franchise between 1923 and 1934, and, of course, number 11 of Daniel Alfredsson, who played with the team between 1995 and 2013. So, yeah, he's played incredible. To give you a bit of context, between the years of 2003 and 2013, he played in all but 16 games in 9 seasons. So a real Iron Man for the team. He went to the Stanley Cup Finals with the team in 2007, before losing to the Anaheim Ducks, of course. But yeah, what an incredible career from a guy that wasn't really known as a goal scorer. He was a first overall pick, but he came in as a solid defensive defenseman, sort of middle pairing defenseman in the National Hockey League. So fair play to him. Anything you want to add on that, Chris?
Not really. I mean, it's rare to have someone stay with one team for so long.
Even in the NHL, like with something like the Elite League, with some of the other European leagues, you expect if a player has an outstanding year that year, he goes and plays in a better league, or they might find other teams or other employment within the same league for their entirety of their career, especially if it's like their hometown league. However, in the NHL, you see players traded and let go by teams a lot because you really need to be at your best every single game. So, yeah, like you mentioned, 17 seasons in the NHL, and he played all of them with the Ottawa Senators, which You don't get that kind of
No.
loyalty from many players anymore. Like, of course, you have the generational guys like the Crosbys and the Ovechkins, which you just can't
Yeah.
imagine playing for another
The
team.
Sedines.
The Sedines, exactly. Like, those
Yeah.
guys that you have on your roster for the entirety of their career. Like, Henrik Lundqvist, I couldn't imagine him playing for another team. Do I think it could happen? Potentially. It depends whether he wants to leave. But you just don't, like, especially those players that have been so good for your franchise for so many years, you just can't imagine them on another team. And it feels weird to see them wearing a different jersey. Like, even seeing a player play for a team for 5 to 7 years and then move on, it's kind of like, oh, that doesn't feel right. But to play 17 years with one franchise, and he was at their heights and he was at their lows. So, wow. I mean, that's impressive. So, fair play to them. So, Chris Phillips retiring, or no, having his number hung up in the rafters, his number being retired. Third Ottawa Senator in franchise history, so it's obviously an honour they don't give out to many people. Then we have some news coming from somewhere else in Canada, the Calgary Flames. I saw this and just thought I'd mention it to you guys because I feel like nobody other than Calgary Flames fans might know this. The Calgary Flames have extended a multi-year contract with general manager Brad Treliving. For context, he has he's helped Calgary make the playoffs 3 times in his tenure with the team, and they have a record of 212 wins, 163 losses, and 35 overtime or shootout losses, with Treliving being at the helm of this organisation. A 5.60 percentage of winning. The team's longest playoff run under Treliving, however, was reaching the second round in 2015. So the last few years they've been first round exits, which doesn't happen. It isn't that good, but they make the playoffs every year. They've got a decent team here. Are they a Stanley Cup winner? I'm not sure. Are they a legitimate playoff contender? Absolutely. So, anything you want to add on this signing, Chris?
Kind of similar to you, really. I think they'll make the playoffs. They're
Yeah.
not going to go deep into it, though.
No, I could see them maybe a conference finals, but I wouldn't see them in the cup finals.
Maybe. I'm not even sure about going that far, to be honest.
And Chris would know about that being a Maple Leafs fan. He knows what it's like to lose in those early rounds of the playoffs.
Oh, yeah, I know what it's like to go 3-0 up and
Yeah, and just miss the playoffs entirely. That's definitely a Maple Leafs thing as well. So, and then something I thought I'd mention. This is the continues the saga of the Edmonton Oilers and how disappointing they seem to be every single year. You think things started to get on the right track, and then something else happens. This week's most unlucky player of the NHL goes to Adam Larson of the Edmonton Oilers. Adam Larson.
You put Jacob Larson
I know.
in the
I was hoping you wouldn't mention that because I couldn't remember his name when I was writing down the notes. So Adam Larson, shut up, Chris. So Adam Larson, he plays in the season.
See what I've got to work with here.
Absolutely. The season opener with the Edmonton Oilers. He then gets injured and he's out for at least 6 weeks. It's like, come on. Like, if the Edmonton Oilers haven't got enough problems as it is already, they get an injury to one of their best defensemen again.
I've looked at the schedule as well, because obviously they cram games in throughout the season here.
Yeah.
If it's, let's look on the positive side, 6 weeks, that's still 20 games.
Yeah. He's out.
He's
for
missing
like
a quarter of the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
At best.
Which is just terrible. Which is sucks for Oilers fans. Is kind of not bad news for everyone else in the league that are like, oh, okay. So, like, they're missing one of their key defensemen. One of their only solid defensemen. Fine, let's do it. You know? So, he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. I thought I'd mention that because that's the real big injury we've had. Other than Roman Polak hitting the boards and then a lot of worries about what the Boston Bruins caster said about it. I'm not quite sure where I land on that. I don't really care, to be honest. It's nothing to do with me. But anyway, so that's what happened. So that's pretty much all the NHL stuff I wanted to talk about this week. Of course, we've only really had each team play a pair of games, 3 games tops so far this year. So we're still very early days. And I've got to wait until Saturday until I get to watch another Rangers game, which I won't even be able to watch because I'm going on holiday, folks. So thanks, NHL. Appreciate it.
How
Anyway.
inconsiderate of them to
It is. You know, I expect
book an
better.
ice hockey game whilst you're on holiday.
I expect the best because I'm simply the best. I'm better than all the rest, right? So,
No.
did I get copyright strike? I don't know.
Probably not
So-
for that rendition.
No, absolutely. So, before we move on to the new segment, well, the returning segment.
New
from-
segment.
No, the returning segment, I was going to say. The new segment for this season. Returning segment from
yeah.
last season.
I thought you were talking about Brits abroad then. I was like, what the?
No.
Well, that's not return.
Speaking of Brits abroad, Chris, take us through Brits abroad. Da-da-da-da-da.
Hey,
Brits
Brits
abroad.
abroad. Right, we'll start as you always do with Liam Kirk, who is back at a point per game average.
Hey.
6 points from 6 games. He had a 2+1 night against Sudbury on Friday night, but then did nothing on Saturday night. But he's at six points from 6 games.
Nicely done. And we forgot to mention he's an alternate captain of the
And he's an
Peterborough
alternate
Pete's now.
captain as well. Yes, he is. Well done, Kirky.
absolutely.
Then we go over to Germany, where everybody else is. Pretty much.
Deutschland.
Right, let's start with Tomo.
Mhm.
Not a good week for him, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Played 3, lost 3.
Oh, Tomo, what are you
With
doing, boy?
Schweiniger back to the bottom of the DEL.
Where he's used to being from last season.
True, there is that. DEL 2, we've got 2 teams in there. Let's start with Russell, who won 2 and lost 1 in the week.
Not bad.
So he's 6th in the league, 15 points,
Nice.
with his Freiburg side.
Nice.
And then Corey Nielsen, 2 overtime losses and a win
Okay.
for 8th in the DEL 2 on 13 points.
Nice.
This week, Hammond with 8 assists and a penalty shot goal.
Wow.
Farmer with 1+1. Hammond now has 14 points. He's the team leader in points and is leading the league in assists with 13.
Wow. Every single time I seem to check flash scores for those games,
Hammond's
it's
always there.
Hammond assisting the goal, which is great for us. Like, he's a solid player, and if he's showing that he can go way over a point per game in the DL2, maybe by the end of the season, maybe even before the end of the season, he gets a call up into the DL or somewhere else in a solid European league. So, fair play to Mike Hammond. That's pretty impressive. Now, before we move on to the last call where you guys can ask us some questions, have some questions ready in the chat. We'll start writing them now so we can see them. We've been looking at the chat as we go along. But any questions about the Elite League, the NHL, any questions you want to ask us about the following week, do put them into the chat now. We will take a look at them. But before we do that, let's take a look at the fantasy scores. So for those of you who don't know, last week, it was last week, wasn't it? Yeah, it was the Sunday before.
Yeah, it was, because I was at work.
Yeah, it was the Sunday before the NHL season started. I reactivated the Odd Men Out Hockey League for the Odd Man Rush YouTube channel, and I got a load of you guys to sign up and join the Fantasy League. We have finished week 1 of the Fantasy League, and the scores look a little bit like this. Boom.
Oh, it's got the
Look at
fancy
us.
screen thingy on. And
Damn right. I'm going to move us out the way, Chris, so we can see the wonder that is fantasy hockey. So,
Yay.
so my first matchup, very close game, but I won it. Thanks. My guys leading it, Artemi Panarin, Jacob Trouba, and Blake Coleman. If you haven't watched Blake Coleman's
this is new
one-handed
this year.
goal, yeah, they've changed it up slightly. It's quite nice.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Blake Coleman, go and watch his one-handed goal from the first week of the season. It's absolutely incredible, and he got me a load of points. So I beat the Manchester Swarm 65-58.
Oh, I like that name. Wait, who's got the best name this year?
They're all like they're very much more proper names compared to
Yeah,
last
they
year.
are, yeah.
I do quite like the Belfast Sucker Punchers. I do quite
Mars
like
missing teeth.
yeah. Cardiff Block 13 I quite like.
Mm.
That's a pretty solid name. The Mars Missing Teeth, the Missouri Angry Beavers. Of course, we've got the return of the Croatian Jets, which is great.
Oh, yeah.
Nice to see at least one team from last year come back. I'm not quite sure what I think about this Nottingham Lions one, but we'll get onto them in a minute.
Oh, I don't know.
So
I hear they're not very good.
The Savonlinna Thrashers, or the Trashers, sorry, not the Thrashers. I got that confused during the live stream as well. Against the Trondheim Raiders. The Raiders get the victory. Taravainen with 9 points, Tyson Barry with 9 points, and Tavares with 8 points. Then the Turku Wildcats finally beat Chris's
Wild
Nottingham
cards,
Lions.
not wild cats.
Sorry, wild cards, excuse me. Eric Howler with 11 points, Rip Hintz with 9 points, and Sidney Crosby with 7. Anthony Mantha with 20 points there, Chris. He scored 5
I
goals,
must be
I think,
honest,
this week.
this is the first time I've seen fantasy this year.
And that's why you lost. Then
Yeah,
we have
basically.
the Baltimore Flames against the Hamilton Clappers, and Baltimore managed to win 41-38. Very, very, very close. Sveshnikov, Larkin, and Ehlers, 10 points, 9 points, and 8 points, respectively. Then Cardiff Block 13 take a victory against the Belfast Sucker Punchers. Mika Zibanejad with 25 points this week. I was impressed with that. Blake Wheeler, Mika Zibanejad, Tyler Bertuzzi, and Mark Scheifele. 25 points, 12 points. Wow, Bertuzzi got 12 points. Good job. And Scheifele, of course, this isn't like actual points they scored, it's fantasy points. Then the Seattle Spitfire managed to beat Max's Nottingham Outlaws 80-37. Oh, Victor Olofsson, who had a really good start to the season. Kevin Shattenkirk, who's playing very well for Tampa Bay. And Ryan Suter, 10 points, 9 points, and 8 points, respectively. Then the Missouri Angry Beavers beat the Mars Missing Teeth 82-39, so another blowout. Dreisaitl with 11 points, Oshie with 9 points, Kane with 8 points. Then Team McLafferty against the Ohio Trapezoids, 42-27. Riley Smith, Huberdeau, and Dunbar, 10, 6, and 6, respectively. The Northern Ireland Labrador boys, I think that's what that says. Wow, this was a close game. 59-58. Oh, that was close. Marner with 15 points, Mikhail Sergachev with 10 points, and William Nylander with 8 points. And then the Stockholm Djurgården, I think is how it's pronounced, against the Newport Netters, 88-41. Austin Matthews with 17 points, 14 points for Gaudreau, and 11 points for Rasmus Dahlin. So that is a look at the fantasy hockey. I'll quickly show you what's going on this week for those of you interested. If you're watching the podcast and you haven't done so already, go and sort out your fantasy teams. Don't be like Chris. So
let's do mine. Let me do it now.
I'm playing the Trondheim Raiders. The Turku Wildcats are playing the Savonlinna Trashers. I keep wanting to say Thrashers. It's killing me. The Nottingham Lions against the Hamilton Clappers. The Manchester Swarm against Cardiff Block 13. The Baltimore Flames against the Sucker Punchers. The Missing Teeth against the Outlaws. The Spitfire against Team McLafferty. The Angry Beavers against the Jets. The Trapezoids against the Netters. And Northern Ireland against Stockholm. So there you go. That is a look at the fantasy hockey upcoming for this week. I'll bring us and our lovely faces back, and then I'll get.
Oh, do you have to?
Yeah, sorry. It's just the way it works. If you don't want to see my face, watch the Brits on Bruins podcast. You don't have to look at me. So
that's very true. That is very true.
There you go.
But then you don't get. Then they don't get to see me, and that's what they really want.
That's true. Yeah, I mean you're just a gorgeous human being, Chris. So it makes sense. Speaking of the Brits on Bruins, episode 3 of the podcast went out first thing this morning. So if you want to go and support another podcast that we do as part of the Hockey Podcast Network, I'll bring up the website for you again just so you guys
can see.
We
just talk hockey so much.
What?
I said we just talk hockey so much.
We really do. It's kind of my job now, and I quite like it. Yeah.
When's my first check coming in for that?
Oh, good question. When my first check comes in. So, yeah, if I just show you what it looks like here. Here we have the website for the hockeypodcastnetwork.com. It's got every single NHL team here. Each team does... that's interesting. 3 podcasts a week. There you go. It's not 3 podcasts. 2 podcasts, excuse me. 1 on Mondays, 1 on Thursdays. Go and check it out. There's one for every team. They've got some very capable podcasters. Some YouTubers, like myself and Chris. Some, I believe the New Jersey Devils podcast is being done by a couple of YouTubers as well, hockey YouTubers. Then you've got guys that actually run, like, legitimate podcasts, for want of a better term. But here's the lovely Boston Bruins logo. You should click on this one. Do you want to know why? Because then you get Brits on Bruins. It might play some audio in a minute, so I'm just going to pause that. There you go. So we've had 34 views on SoundCloud. It's available on Spotify, and I believe it's available on Apple as well, though they said they've had a few issues with that, but they may be resolved now. I will always go and listen to it. I've bookmarked every single one on Spotify, so I have a collection of them there. So go and take a look at it. We're getting some decent views on our podcast, so if you're interested in the Brits on Bruins, go and check it out. Go and check out the Hockey Podcast Network. We'd really appreciate it if you did, guys, because we work quite hard on that. We sit there and write a lot of stuff that we need to talk about each week with the podcast. So yeah, go and support it if you want to. That would be nice. Or don't if you don't. That's fine too. But even if you're not a Bruins fan, we talk about interesting stuff. It's about the Boston Bruins, but we talk about all things Boston Bruins, not just like, oh, this team won, you know? And they're quite short episodes. They're like 30, 35 minutes. So they're quite quick to just go through while you're doing something else. But anyway, let's go to the audience questions to finish off this podcast. We've pretty much hit 90 minutes. So, Chris, any interesting questions that you want to read out?
Well, one that I haven't got a clue about, which is Dark Horse for the Calder.
Dark Horse for the Calder. At the moment, Victor Olofsson, because he's had a good start to the year. Hughes and Kako are going to be up there. Maker, Makar, however you want to call him, he's going to be up there. Those three are kind of like the front runners, in my opinion, for the conventional choice for the Calder Trophy. Victor Olofsson, if he keeps playing that way, I wouldn't be surprised if he was in talks as well, and if he won it as well. Especially since Hughes and Kako haven't scored a point yet, which I've been waiting for Kako every time he's on the ice to try and score a point. But he looks like he carries this air of maturity about him, like he's been playing in the NHL for like half a decade. Like it hasn't fazed him. You know, like some rookies will get really worried that they haven't scored their first goal in their debut because they see other rookies score in their debut. They didn't score on their first shot and they didn't make history or whatever. But Kako, I think, is taking it in good stride. I think that's with the playing with men aspect that he had last year. So fair play to him.
Yeah. And the other question is thoughts on the Nottingham Panthers. Fans seem to be in panic mode already on social media.
When it says the Panthers, that might also be the Florida Panthers. So
no, because he says two things further down. Nottingham Panthers.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, my mistake. We did go into a bit of detail about that earlier, but to summarise it, because we didn't quite summarise it when we were talking about it, Guy Doucette and Tim Wallace are making good decisions and good moves at the right time. They're not doing it too early, so the guys haven't had a chance to prove themselves, and they're not doing it too late that they're already at the bottom of the standings with a huge mountain to climb. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think they've not waited and gone, oh, we're 20 points back, let's change something.
Yeah.
We're winless now for 3 weeks, and they've made the call. Good call, in my opinion. Let's see who they bring in, really.
Absolutely.
But I don't think it's time to really panic just yet.
I don't really want them to bring in somebody that's played... I don't want them to go for, oh, let's bring in a guy that played 250 NHL games. Go for a guy that fits your system and works and will put up points. That's all you want. Yeah. The big names are nice, but not if they don't produce. And then lastly, we'll finish off with this one. Leo Anderson says, most underrated NHL team. Chris, do you want to chime in on that? Toronto, they're not underrated. They're overrated. They've always have been.
Are. They really are.
Especially by like Sportsnet and TSN. So.
Oh, well, yeah. But I mean, they're always going to be on there because they're original six and all that.
Absolutely. And like for once in half a century, they've actually got a decent team. So.
Ooh.
Am I wrong?
No.
There you go.
No.
In my opinion, this is going to be biased, but I will explain why.
He's going to say the Rangers because they're meant to still be in a rebuild.
So I'm going to pick the New York Rangers as the most... As the standings look at the moment, they're undefeated. Sure, they played Ottawa, which, I mean, is more of an AHL team than it is an NHL team this year. They've got some decent players on there, but it's very much like first year of the rebuild. Oh, God, let's go through the growing pains really quickly. They've got a good coach in DJ Smith there that went through Toronto's rebuild and knows how it works and knows that patience is a virtue with something like this. The reason I say the Rangers is because they're a team that, because they're still in that rebuild and because we've still got a lot of young players, sure, we've got guys like Trouba and Panarin that have joined the team, so the expectation to produce and have a good season is much greater. But because there's so many young, inexperienced players in the NHL, I mean, that are on the roster, and because we've got we've got a prospect pool that's basically overflowing with talent at the moment, it was still going to take us a few years to get to real title contention, but I'm quite impressed with how well they started off this season. Panarin and Zibanejad are clicking instantaneously, which is exactly what we needed. Zibanejad's continued his momentum from last year. Trouba has looked solid on the back end. Adam Fox has been a really nice addition. Mark Stahl has looked okay to start the season, which I'm quite surprised at. He's a guy that gets a lot more flack than I think he should do, but he's looked quite good to start the season. And Henrik Lundqvist and Georgiev have played relatively well. They're still going through growing pains, but I wouldn't be surprised if they made the playoffs this year. I know that's far too early to tell, but with some of the guys that they've got, I'm quite impressed with what they've got so far. So, because they're a team that nobody really expects them to do too much, because they've got this rebuild tag on them, like, I give them the most underrated team, especially if they do make the playoffs. Like, nobody's really expecting it. I'm not expecting it that much, but it could happen. But anyway, on that note, we are going to end this week's Icing on the Skate podcast. Season 2, episode 5 already.
5?
Oh, it's gone quick. So, just a heads up, next week there won't be a podcast. I'm not going to be here. So, I'm going on vacation to Ireland for a week, which will be very nice. It's going to be lovely. I've never been before. So, I'm going to go have a nice little trip there, catch up with some friends, see how things are going. And likewise with videos next week, there probably won't be any, because I won't be here. I have got another story video going out this week. I need to finish writing it and get it up in time. But it's a more recent one and an interesting one in my opinion, so we'll do that. I'll give you a hint. It relates to the Philadelphia Flyers. That's all you need to know. So, yeah. No podcast next week. We'll be back the week after, I believe so. Yeah. Other than that, thanks, Chris, for joining me again, like you always do.
Not a problem.
Can't seem to get away from you, which is fine, because...
You keep inviting me on.
It's true. It's just as a punching bag, you know?
Yeah, I know.
So, on that note, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed the podcast. Other than next week, every Monday, 7 p.m. British time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, check out the podcast. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.